Hello and welcome to the Miramichi Historical Linkages podcast for this week. Sean McCarthy, Tasha Smith, your hosts, joined today by our special guest, Brendan Savage. Brendan, welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, what we've done over the last number of weeks, Brendan, is we spoke to folks like yourself, historians, also people in the community that kind of made a lot of connections through the work that they've done and the travels that they've made, so on and so forth. And today we'd like to kind of speak to you about some of that work in your case, most particularly, and maybe to start off with, your work with the North Shore Regiment. So maybe just for the benefit of our listeners who are unfamiliar, or maybe just kind of know the North Shore Regiment in kind of a broad sense, maybe you could you give us a little bit of background on the regiment and where your interest set in?
Yeah, so the regiment itself, the North Shore Regiment, is sort of represents the region from Campbellton to the Miramichi in terms of the regimental scope of things. I mean, I know geographically speaking, the North Shore can encompass quite a bit more, and all points in between that I say that. The regiment itself is 100 years old, actually over 100 years old. They just had their anniversary this past year, and had quite a bit of distinction through the First World War, though they were classified as a battalion at that point. But their notoriety comes from the Second World War and the actions that they took place, principally D-Day, and then subsequent battles that happened after. And the regiment itself made up a very interesting demographic representation of the region itself, with Anglophone, Francophone, First Nation, and it's kind of one of the first instances, I think, on a sort of from our local history on an international level of all these different perspectives and cultures and religions sort of coming together and working for a common cause, where regionally here they've been divided historically and even had been sources of conflict. And I like to think that it's because of their cooperation under the worst circumstances that I think some lessons came back, and we start hopefully, it took a while still, and we're still there going through those processes, but we're breaking down some of those barriers. And I think a lot of the stereotypes that were learned historically were sort of dispelled overseas. My interest in all this came from my grandfather being a member of the North Shore Regiment. And at a very young age, I recall, I can close my eyes and visualize in his living room a picture, which a lot of the veterans had, a picture of their time overseas, like an enlistment one, giving recognition to their service. And I believe I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and knowing that there was something special about that. I don't know, I was fixated on it. And being kind of an annoying little kid, I poked and asked questions. And I got very, very, very one-line, shallow answers. So my grandfather wasn't one to talk about it. My father and his siblings, the extended family, had really very little knowledge of anything. They knew he was overseas, but never any extent to the story. And I knew there was something there. And I would say during my undergrad studies at UMB that I think he maybe came to the realization that I wasn't just after some adventure stories, and that I was very much legitimately interested. And then he started to open up. And I think that's where that portal for me goes into the work that I've done regarding the regiment thus far.
Oh, great. I think that's something that that's a bit of a common experience for some folks. I think, I know myself, like my grandfather, my great uncle, you know what I mean? We're both overseas. My great uncle with the Carlton York, and two of my great uncles, but one of my great uncles with the North Shore Regiment, who passed away before I was born. My grandfather was a military policeman in Newfoundland. But yeah, like I say, you're often kind of asking those questions. But as you say, it's not something that's easy to talk about. And I know my dad often talked about, when he was a kid, kind of sitting under the table, when his uncles were talking, so that they didn't know he was there, but he could kind of listen and hear those stories. So, good for you for kind of, continuing to pursue that course. And like I say, and then also doing it, in your professional studies as well.
Yeah, and to add to your point there, like I often hear, and it's kind of sad, and I'm hoping that, some of your listeners may fall in this category, but there are a number of people who were the children of these guys who went overseas. These are retirees pretty much at this point, and I get a lot of them come to me, and very much with guilt that I didn't know what Dad did overseas, and almost like I wasn't interested, but odds are they wouldn't have talked about it, and they weren't interested. Everything I find with families of men that served overseas, it skipped a generation. It went to the grandkids for some reason. It was almost as if there was a point, I felt like, around the 50th anniversary of the end of the war, going into the 60th anniversary of the war, where veterans saw kind of the sunset of their lives coming, and I think they felt that they were going to go to the grave with a lot of this stuff, and it was going to be forgotten. And so that they kind of got out of this very modest, very secretive, just get on with your lives attitude they had post-war with their own kids, and they came to the realization, I got to say something about this, and I feel bad for the kids of those guys, because they do feel a sense of like, I should have asked, but I don't think it was available for them.
No, I tend to agree for sure. I mean, I know my grandfather never talked about it until it was, as you say, kind of toward the very end of his life, that he talked about his time in service, and, kind of told any stories in any kind of detail for sure. Mm-hmm. So that pursuit, and, not only for your grandfather, but for others in the regiment itself, has kind of led you to a lot of very interesting encounters and travels. So you visited France on a number of occasions, and kind of gone, kind of followed the trail of the regiment. What has that been like?
Surreal, I guess is the best way to put it. I never, as a kid, asking my grandfather these questions and getting his stories, I imagined what these places would be. I never fathomed that in my professional career I would have opportunities as such. It just seems that I find some cases it's almost like divine providence here that these opportunities have happened, and very fortunate circumstances have occurred, and a lot of it is very coincidental. For example, when about a year before my grandfather passed, I took it upon myself, just after finishing my undergrad studies at UMB, to do a very formal kind of historical investigative work on his story, and doing background research, and having all my facts in a line, and then getting his perspective and recording, and doing a very formal interview process about this. And one of the things that I ended up doing was I finally got to the point where on D-Day, talking about the incident that occurred where he was severely wounded, and talking about the exact place, which was a place called Tailleville in France. And so at the time, this is 2006, so even the internet back then was kind of in its infancy, so there was not a whole lot to work with. And I remember Googling this Tailleville place, and I had this small little website that was just like finding the City of Miramichi website. So what am I going to do? Anyway, so I said, what the hell, go for it. I'm going to send an email out to them in French, explaining who I was, what I was trying to find, what I was looking for, and never got a response. So I was like, all right, well, that's just a dead end. But a month later, I get this package in the mail from France. And I open it up, and inside is all these aerial photographs of the village with this like wax paper film, and it had labels on it. And the author of this package had said, okay, this is where your grandfather was, and this is where he was wounded, and this is where this happened, and here's where the Germans were, and it's all like lined up. And so anyway, fast forward a year, I had an opportunity to be a chaperone on a trip with students with Brett Cameron and Chris Matheson, and we were happened to be going to Normandy. And we were hitting the major spots. They weren't North Shore specific. We were in a place called Cossé-sur-Mer where the Juno Beach Center is. But like to give kind of a perspective to your listeners, like Juno Beach, sometimes people think it's like you show up at Cavendish and it's all in one spot you can see. Really, Juno Beach is almost like the entire say coastline of the Miramichi River. Like, for example, I kind of equated like the North Shore landed in Logieville, but the Juno Beach Center is in Nelson. So there's quite a distance in between kind of thing, right? So I was in the Nelson equivalent of things on that particular visit. And I remember looking down the shore, knowing the North Shore were down here somewhere. And I could see it off in the distance, but knowing that it was not obtainable on this trip. But on our way back, I looked at a map. We were heading back to our accommodations in our meal reservation. And I noticed Tyville is like right on the way. Like it's literally just a stop. And my colleague Brett Cameron, his great uncle happened to have been killed next to my grandfather at the same incident. So he had an invested interest to be at this place too. So we pulled over. And we were able to actually convince the bus driver to pull over. I got a nice bottle of French wine for him to do this. And we couldn't have the kids go off. We had about 50 kids. And we're like, we don't have time. We only have time for like a 5-minute stop just to see this place and go. So that's fine. So we get off the bus and I'm able to find the place because from memory from the photographs and stuff. And it's this very distinct S-turn. And I'm standing there and I'm taking it all in. You know, this is kind of like, to me, I thought this is everything that I've done to this point related to my grandfather and all my studies in the North Shore. And I felt a little cheated, like, 5 minutes is all I'm going to get, but better than nothing. And I'm standing in a place where basically would have been from the German perspective of what happened. And to my left, I realized I'm basically standing in front of a gate into a farmhouse. And these people emerged from the house and they started walking towards us. So anyway, I can't speak French, but Brett can. And I said, Brett, maybe like we're on someone else's property here. Like we need to like shuffle out of here. And as they got closer, I recognized one of the guys because in that package that was sent to me, it was actually the mayor of Tyville. And here was the mayor approaching me because he'd given his picture in this package. I said, Brett, this is the guy who sent the package. This is the guy. So anyway, they got closer and Brett was able to explain who we were, and they were like, "You're the guy we sent the package to." So that became the beginning of a lot of the connections that I had in Normandy. And I know it's a long story to get into that, but that visit in 2008 was the beginning of a network of things related to the North Shore that has gone now for over a decade, so to speak.
No, that's very, that's great. And I mean, I think it's led to, from that relationship, of course, now, even our two communities are much more, united now in recognition of that than what they were, so to think how, an email or a letter, what I mean, between two people can eventually build into, to something, like I say, two communities really kind of coming together and uniting over history. I mean, that's very, inspirational in a way, especially for a project like ours, is where we're just, trying to kind of find those connections and seeing what they can build.
Right. And they've always been there. Mm-hmm. It's just that they haven't been tapped into. And I don't think there was maybe the interest in previous generations for it. Or I think in some cases, even with my grandfather, they're just, I think there was a trauma that didn't want to be revisited. I tried during anniversaries to get my grandfather to go and see these things, and he's like, no. He said, there was a job we did in '44, and the job is done. Why do I need to go back? And he was always kind of deflecting it, sort of thing. But like this family, they're the Castinos were quite close. Because of that traumatic event that took place. And actually in that same visit, he's since deceased, but we met a Joseph Castino who was 22 at the time and actually witnessed my grandfather being shot. And his story coincided completely with my grandfather's story, even though the two men had never met. And so he was a little surprised to see me because he had always thought for about, at that point, it had been 70 years that he had died. And if he had died, I wouldn't be here. So the fact that things played out the way they did. And from there, like, we were able to get a very extensive network. And we fast forward 10 years and we're into 2018. So in 2018, our district decided to have a 75th anniversary D-Day commemoration trip for students in all the high schools as a way to kind of unify this new super district that had come into play. And so in the year before, because this was going to happen in June 2019, a couple of colleagues, Brett Cameron, Chris Mass, and I decided to head over on our own as kind of like a history nerd group, and just basically scout out the areas that were North Shore specific. And so in the months leading up to this little sort of recon trip, as you call it, we went through the North Shore War Diaries, which is a day-by-day account of where they were, what was happening, even the weather and that sort of thing. And we Google mapped the entire thing day by day from June 6th all the way to the end of the war. And what we essentially did is when we flew over, we started with D-Day, and we made our way all the way through, stopping to see local people, local contacts, networking, and also venues. And what is it like, again, with our main mission being not only honoring the North Shore, but what is what is going to be the most impactful for students, and if they can get the maximum experience, obviously they would take that with them going forward and be impactful and responsible citizens. That's all ultimately we want in the ideals of remembrance. So that being said, I mean, we reached out to a number of different towns. We renewed contacts with St. Aubin, where the North Shore landed. I mean, Bathurst is twinned there with them, and they were very open and receptive. Obviously we saw our friends again in Tyville, had a very memorable evening there. And even as you alluded to, Sean, with Carpiquet and how we've just recently twinned here in Miramichi with them, to bring back that importance. Carpiquet was one of it has to be the most horrific battle that the North Shore fights. And it's hugely traumatic for anyone who was involved in it. And, it is great to see that kind of local remembrance, kind of revival of that battle. And, all those guys are gone, and that could easily be forgotten. But just even as simple as twinning with a community like that. And I can tell you that the people at Carpiquet are ecstatic about that. I'm actually very surprised that no one else has even reached out to them, because there were other regiments that were involved in that battle. The North Shore really took that on the nose, historically speaking. And though they do get very little credit. Actually, the regiment itself, that's one of my other driving forces. It gets very little credit. I remember going through the Stacks UMB to do papers, and I rarely did anything on the North Shore because it was too much of a risk in my undergrad, because there were very minimal footnotes on the regiment in historical sources, and it just didn't have enough substance to give you the security that you might get a good mark. It just it was gonna take a lot for an undergrad student to pull it off. So and that left me frustrated. And I'm really glad that there's been a body of work that has been developed. There's been I almost want to call it a renaissance in a way, a re-understanding of what has occurred, and they're getting finally the recognition they should. I mean, many regiments that landed on Juno, Queen's Own, Regina Rifles, they've gotten all kinds of accolades, and the North Shore just kind of quietly existed. So it's good to see. It's good to see. So that was all kind of part of that networking thing, and we still work with a lot of these people today. And I think it's great for our community that we revive and we keep those connections, because I think we were at a point, and I know it sounds weird because I'm like patting myself on the back, but I think we were really at a point where, had that work not gotten done, those bridges might have been gone. I think.
I have to say that quite the steps that you and your guys' team has taken. I admire your guys' passion and drive of this type of information. And I totally agree about the importance of remembering and understanding and giving recognition where it is needed / deserved. And I love that you guys are helping out the next generation by providing not only the necessary resources, but the memorable experience of deepening their understanding that much more by giving them those firsthand experiences as well. That's just awesome. I'm so happy to see that.
Yeah, it is like I think the way that with this generation, that's how you get through to them. Like we can do, and we have lots of great material that we do in our classrooms. Like I'm very pleased with the department that we have here. That I know what kind of lessons we put out, but we're competing against like TikTok and Snapchat and a lot of things like that. And but you don't see kids with phones out when you put them at Beni Sumer, like Cane War Cemetery, and they're going through and they're seeing last names of guys that are on their contact list, family members, and it's like that is as real as you can get it. And the other thing too to add, when we go over finally with this group in 2019, and we have 150 students and staff, and we go down. Some of the things we wanted to ensure is because there wasn't a whole lot. That's one of our findings in 2018. We went on our own. There's not a lot there. There's one monument that Monsignor Hickey and the registered veterans of the regiment, with their meager amounts of money, put together. And it's not glamorous. I mean, there are a lot of the Ontario regiments could afford sculptors, and they went and very nice artistic ones, and they look beautiful, and I'm not dismissing it. But when you go to Carpiquet and you see the one monument they put in, it's just a basic granite thing. And that's what they could afford. But it just screams North Shore. That's what the farmer, fishermen, lumberjacks, that's all they had for money. So when we went this time, so we have to put our stamp there. We have to expand the knowledge. And we were very fortunate to be able to put a couple of plaques in place that we not only put plaques in, and that were sponsored by all the major communities in our district that were unveiled by students. But these plaques were in the languages of the regiment. So we had English, French, and Mi'kmaq. And we felt that was very, very important because that was the makeup of the regiment. And a lot of those components got forgotten. And so we wanted to ensure that everyone was represented. And it was really cool. I mean, we had Francophone kids, we had First Nation kids, we had English kids. Everyone was unveiling this cooperatively. And so it really was like a group effort. And it's really cool to see. Like, I think it was the other day, I was meeting with an individual who was actually going over on their own and wanted sort of like a tour guide as to where they should go. And I was taking them through the Google Street View to say, okay, you want to go here. This is what it looks like. And our plaques now are showing up. They must have done an update. So our plaques are there, which is cool. And I'm looking forward next year when we go over again with an even bigger group. But now we've actually maxed out. We're at 300 people, and we can't take any more because we basically have about half of the regiment that landed on D-Day right now. So we're hoping again to be able to revisit those plaques that we put in, and the fortunate thing is we have no desire or any need right now to do any more of that, because we've gone and we've left the appropriate stamp that's necessary to remember these guys by.
And I think also, on top of those acknowledgments, I think, as you alluded to a little bit earlier, you've in your work, you've kind of showcased the regiment in other key ways across the country. I'm mindful of the Heritage Minute on Archie McNaughton, and of course the work that you did with the mint and on the commemorative coin, and identifying the gentleman who we see in the footage of the landing on Juno Beach. So those two things, I think, brought a lot of attention from across the country onto the regiment as well.
Yeah, no question. And again, I keep coming back to things being so coincidental. I mean, we had this. This trip for 2019 with all these kids, going over, and we had some cool things with like projects and stuff that we were doing, but these things just fell in our lap. Like, I mean, the Heritage Canada approached me in the fall and said, like, we're doing this expose on MacNaughton, and my grandfather was the radio operator for MacNaughton, so they had a very intimate relationship in some ways, and I almost see in some ways like MacNaughton serving as almost a father figure to my grandfather, because to kind of give you a background there, I mean, my grandfather's father, so my great-grandfather, had died in the winter of 1940 of a heart attack. And my grandfather, who was 15 at the time in 1940, realized that if he's able to kind of swindle his way into the army underage, he would get the same wage as his father and himself combined got in the woods. And he would also be seen as a dependent of his mother. So he would get the salary of a married man and to help support his brothers and sisters back home. And so 1940, he enlists, and Archie MacNaughton's the one to sign the paper. He was 15. How does a 15-year-old, and you see the pictures of him, he's baby-faced. How does that happen? I think in a lot of ways, between the lines, MacNaughton knew exactly what he was trying to do. And I think MacNaughton felt that he could kind of take him under his wing and look after him and get him through the war. And so, the unfortunate circumstance that happens in Tyville, and actually, the more research I've done there, I think MacNaughton saves my grandfather's life, even though my grandfather is shot by that machine gun that ambushed them. MacNaughton was standing directly in front of him. And they said after he was killed, they counted 17 bullet wounds. So his body shielded my grandfather. There's no question about it in my mind. The fact that the Heritage Minute people came and asked for my input on that was really, really special. But it did bring to light that the regiment, which I feel like has been really, it's been kind of an injustice, I think, in historical annals of military history. I think there's other kind of regional politics, but I think also the same thing. If you were a historian back in the 60s and 70s and you showed up to these guys' farms and lumber camps and said, "Hey, tell me about the war," they would have told you to screw off. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to like, "I don't want to talk about this. Like, what the hell's wrong with you?" And why wouldn't we want to talk about this? And a lot of them, remarkably, I felt, came back. And I know a lot of them had demons. A lot of them were looked down upon for being alcoholics, but I mean, the stuff I read about they went through, like, I let them have their drink. I mean, there's no wonder they did. I mean, there's no such thing as treatment for PTSD, and we're not even doing a good job of that for our servicemen that come home from Afghanistan and places. So I can't even imagine what some of those guys went through. So just kind of bring all those kind of stories back to light. And then, like you said, with the landing, the most famous D-Day footage, it's in every single documentary. And for years and years, like, I mean, dumb producers in the States like said that it was American troops. Like, anyone with half a brain would know, look at the kit. They don't look like American troops. Like, compared to Saving Private Ryan, like, they don't even look the same. I can forgive the British for thinking it was theirs because, again, very similar kit, very similar uniform, but really cool. When we finally were able to say, okay, these are North Shore guys, because we were able to take the houses in the background and say, well, one of the houses is still standing and it matches completely. So we were able then to say, okay, within a 50-foot section of each, and this is the beauty of what I've been able to do with kids, I can take them right down to where A Company of Chatham landed and say, if you have relatives who were on D-Day with A Company, you are standing exactly where they landed. This is the patch of beach. Like, you look around within 50 feet of here, this is where they were rushing ashore. This is the wall that they climbed over. These are the houses that the Germans were firing at them that they had to go and clear out, and so on and so forth. And so we have that ability. And then to, really the cherry on it all is to be able to identify that guy. And it was a really interesting team of individuals like-minded like myself who were very much interested in solving that mystery for the Mint. And we honestly, even like Dr. Milner, Mark Milner, he kind of thought, there's no way, we might get an educated guess here, but there's probably not really much of a chance that we're going to. And I said, give me and we were basically ready to give our final report. I said, just give me 24 hours more, just 24 hours more. I think I could get this. And anyway, long story short, I was able to track down a living relative of this guy, and she sent along a picture, and it was like, and we did a comparison actually with a forensics connection we had with the RCP in Ottawa to kind of say, okay, is this face? And it was hard because the face is only a side profile, as you know, when it looks back, and the picture itself is front. But they did say that, like, they said we can't 100% say it's him, but we definitely can't say it's not. because there were too many comparisons. So we were pretty for sure that it was. And plus, why would the family lie about that? Actually, the family had never seen the footage. This was the first time they'd ever seen it, which I find very, very remarkable. So it was really cool to be able to open their eyes to, here's their father landing on D-Day. And he is the face of D-Day. So.
Amazing.
Absolutely. So, as this episode draws to a close, first of all, Brendan, I want to congratulate you on all the great work that you're doing, and we certainly hope to hear more from you and your colleagues as this journey continues to grow and to mature. And we wish you all the best of luck with your 300 folks.
I'm going to need it. I'm going to need the best of luck in this. But no, it's exciting. It's really exciting. And it's really fun to be a part of continuing local history. And I have to, give lots of credit to you guys doing things like this, because it's definitely needed and well overdue. And I think it's really important that we keep emphasizing these things.
Hear, hear. So, anything more before we stitch this up for this week?
No, I can't. I mean, again, it's been a pleasure to be able to share these, and I know I could go on, and we could probably turn this into like the length of Ben-Hur or something. But there's a lot, like it's great to get a chance to be able to share this knowledge. And, if there's any listeners out there that have anything to share related to the work that I'm doing, more than happy to listen and take any knowledge and add it to the database that's already been collected. So.
Great altogether. Well, Brandon, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, and it's always great to talk to other folks who are doing the kind of work that we're doing, and building connections for the community, but also honoring the past in the way that you are. So we certainly hope, as I say, to hear from you again. You never know. We might have you back on to tell more, because again, as you say, we could. We've only gone 30 minutes, so that leaves us with another 3 hours and so for to reach that Ben-Hur length. That's it. So yeah, so until then, we wish you all the best of luck, and we thank all of you who are listening and viewing this. Certainly, we encourage you to tell your friends and all those who are interested in local history about this podcast and the work that Brandon is doing. So for now, we're going to be on our way, and we wish you all the best, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time.